Right now in America, we have over 22 million workers who are making less than $15 an hour, and nearly 40 million people in our country earning less than $17 an hour. Shamefully, the federal minimum wage, despite the efforts of myself and other people here, have not been raised since 2009 and remains an unbelievable $7.25 an hour. Will you work with those of us who want to raise the federal minimum wage to a living wage to take millions of Americans out of poverty?
Senator, I believe that the minimum wage is more of a statewide and regional issue.
So you don't think we should change the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour?
No, sir.
Trump's Treasury Secretary nominee Scott Bessent is unsurprisingly against raising the federal minimum wage above $7.25. He's also unsurprisingly against any tax increases on billionaires.
In 2013, Congress extended the Bush tax cuts for everyone except those making more than $400,000 a year. This bipartisan decision saved the Treasury $600 billion, helping to narrow the deficit. Do you agree that ending the tax cuts for those making more than $400,000 would help close the deficit and reduce our national debt?
Senator Warnock, I do not. I believe that you would capture an inordinate amount of small business people who largely are in that cohort of 400,000.
Now, pay attention to that question and answer that Senator Raphael Warnock cited about cutting off the Bush tax cuts at $400K, which saved the Treasury $600 billion, which narrowed the deficit, before asking Bessent if he'd be in favor of doing it again, which would naturally narrow the same deficit the Republicans always claim that they're going to reduce. And he said no. So doesn't that mean he's not focused on reducing the deficit? But it got worse.
So you wouldn't cut it off at $400,000. What about $1 million?
That, again, I believe these are small business pass-through owners, and I believe that we, as I said before, Wall Street's done great. It is time for Main Street to do well, and small businesses need to drive what I call the reprivatization here away from this government spending.
What about those making more than $10 million? Would we reduce the deficit by extending those tax cuts for folks making about $10 million?
So again, I think it's important that we put in incentives for them to invest.
What about $1 billion?
So again, that I think that these are the job creators.
So there's no income level for which you would support raising taxes. Is that fair?
There is no income level that I don't think we should continue the TCJA as it was.
He's got a new bullshit excuse for never increasing taxes on the richest of the rich. For each level up, Bessent tried to come up with something to cover for the fact that MAGA's policy is for billionaires to take in even more money and force everyone else to pay for it. He's openly in favor of a continued and permanent redistribution of wealth to billionaires to the detriment of the deficit. But they have everyone blaming the poor and entitlement programs for the issues and not these billionaire welfare queens.
Is there any billionaire rich enough who you wouldn't support a tax cut for going forward?
That I think it's unwise to single out any
rich people?
Any individual.
Okay, is there any group of billionaires? You can just pick a dollar figure and there can be more than one above that.
I could give you a glib answer, but I won't.
Listen to them tell you who they are and who they work for. Because this fake populist movement that Donald Trump tricked so many of his voters into believing gives a damn about them is made up of billionaires. And Scott Bessent is definitely one of them.
So we need to keep our eye on the ball. Donald Trump is putting a record number of billionaires in his cabinet because the only thing that's going to happen when Donald Trump is president is that billionaires are going to steal from the rest of us. That's what the Trump administration is going to be. A massive tax cut for billionaires and millionaires, the wholesale turnover of government to benefit billionaires, while the rest of us get screwed. Higher taxes, higher prices for regular Americans, less consumer protections, all so that the billionaires who are in Donald Trump's cabinet and all their other billionaire friends can make even more money. Keep your eye on the ball. It's not a coincidence that Donald Trump is putting all of these super rich people in his cabinet.
When's the last time anyone's heard of billionaires willing to advance policies to give non-billionaires more opportunities to live better? In order for them to get more, it has to come from somewhere else. And Scott Bessent was cornered into admitting that they're targeting another source to increase their wealth.
Yes or no, will you recommend cutting Medicaid?
I'm sorry. Did you say, I didn't hear whether you said Medicaid or Medicare.
Yes or no, will you recommend cutting Medicaid?
Medicaid, that I will, it's the business of Congress to do the budget, and I am in favor of empowering states, and I believe that for some states that will be an increase, for some states that will be a decrease.
So, Mr. Bessent, will you recommend cutting Medicaid to President Trump? And I'll remind you that you acknowledge that one of your responsibilities as Secretary of the Treasury will be to be providing this advice.
I will get back to you on this when I have seen the details of the full budget proposal once President Trump is in office and if confirmed.
Bessent has no need for Medicare. He's a billionaire, remember? And he became a billionaire by focusing on collecting as much money as he could from other people. So when he finally gets a glance at that budget the Republicans have consistently promised will include cuts to Medicare, what motivation does he have to recommend funding a program that he's got no attachments to? This oligarchy that has operated behind a very thin veil for decades has reached its full-grown weight behind a president that was somehow able to fully convince enough people that as long as they trust them with their bank accounts, everything will be great.
Do you believe the tax code should treat wages differently than it treats wealth?
Look, in any tax system that advantages and creates distortions, it is a change that, Senator, it is a decision that was made when the tax codes were written. And so every tax code involves the trade-offs and distortions in favor of other the gains.
It sounds to me like you do believe that it's fine to treat wealth more favorably. I couldn't disagree more. The idea that a dollar earned by a hedge fund manager has more value than a dollar earned by a teacher or a factory worker, I just think it's a disconnect with the American people.